It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. Oh, so many things to talk about. I mean, it's the off season, right? So there's a lot of opinion havers out there who are kind of emerging from their cocoons and spreading their beautiful wings to become like the most obnoxious humans on the planet, which is why we're here to talk about it after the fact. How are you doing? Before I get into all of that, how are you doing, Mr. Eisner? How's things with George?
It's a
Hanging in
happy
there?
Memorial Day. We're recording this on Monday night. I feel
Yeah.
I'm in an apologetic mood. I feel like we
Okay.
owe Fox and Fox Sports a sincere apology,
Uh-huh.
given the recent revelations around the opener for Ohio State versus Texas and the actual guilty parties in terms of why we are not getting our deeply desired night game.
Do you think, okay, so the story is, as George is alluding to, that Texas reportedly, allegedly, suspiciously blocked, hypothetically, uh, blocked Ohio State's attempt to move. So what they want to do, okay, so they're like, Fox doesn't want us to do it at night on Saturday. Okay. And then Ohio State was like, how about this? How about this? Sunday night, Texas. And Texas was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so they rejected it. They decided not to do, which I know like the knee jerk reaction here is to go, what a bunch of babies. I can't believe Texas is so afraid of Ohio State.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Let's ride with that. Let's just go ahead. Is it stupid? Yes, but also
Longhorns don't want to play a night game.
Is it too dark? Is it scary?
Buckeyes.
Is it scary out? Do you not like the dark?
I have school the next day. I don't want to play on a Sunday night.
Which, and by the way, we all know that Ohio State, if the situation was flipped, would be like, yes, let's play at DKR. Let's go and play Sunday night the day before kids have to be in class. Let's do it. They would be all about it, of course. And because I don't have to think about that hypothetical, I'll just say it's true. How about that? So yeah, it's still going to be Saturday at noon because Fox wills it so, and Texas is a bunch of big babies and they can't hang with Ohio State. And by the way, if Ohio State loses to Texas, that's why. That's why. It's not because there's a talent disparity. It's not because Texas is returning more guys. It's not because Arch Manning is a better quarterback than whoever Ohio State ends up trotting out there. It's entirely 100% because they played the game at noon instead of night.
And by the same token, if they had lost the Cotton Bowl, it was because Texas was playing a glorified home game.
Correct.
So if Ohio State doesn't win in either case, it's because of the other parameters surrounding.
Oh yeah, it's all extenuating circumstances. There's absolutely no way that Ohio State loses either of those games legitimately, or because of talent or coaching or anything like that. It's because evil exists, and Texas is a bunch of babies. How about that? Horns down.
Evil media companies and big college football money.
Screwed
Ohio State over.
The SEC once more trying to tilt the playing field in their favor because they can't hang with the mighty Big Ten, which, by the way, is also the opinion of Urban Frank Meyer. I think that's very funny to me. Urban Meyer's going to say whatever he has to say, right? He works for Fox. Fox has the Big Ten. He's going to say that the Big Ten is better than the SEC. One of the things that he said, that he talked about, he was on some podcast and he says that the Big Ten has passed the SEC at the upper part. So in other words, the Big Ten at the top is better than the SEC in general. Do you agree with that sentiment from Urban Meyer?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, what am I going to say?
No, I think it's fair. No, I think it's an interesting conversation because there are two major conferences in college football now. That's basically it, right? There's the big two, and then everybody else is kind of like, scrounging around for scraps. So these, when you have this kind of Cold War between two superpowers, they're always going to be judging their own strength based on the other side, right? So if that's the case, I think it's a legitimate question to ask if the Big Ten overall, and especially at the top, like the teams that can compete for championships, if they're better than the SEC. And for years, it was not the case. Years, the SEC was clearly the better conference. I think it's legitimate to say that maybe that's not the case anymore.
Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I know they didn't have a good bowl record. I think the truth, honestly, is that it's the superior conference is probably something that fluctuates or is going to fluctuate a lot more in the years to come and in recent seasons than the run of dominance that they were admittedly on from the time Ohio State lost the national championship to Florida, and then LSU won, and then Auburn had one a couple years later. Florida got another one in short order after LSU got theirs, and that run where you had and then Alabama got their first one. So that run where you had a solid different mix of teams from the SEC winning national championships. I don't think that we're going to see that same suite of variety from Big Ten teams in terms of representatives from that conference winning. Maybe Oregon gets one with the amount of money that they're putting towards their team in one of the seasons to come.
Sure, yeah.
But I feel like if any team other than Ohio State is consistently representing the Big Ten in the national championship going forward, then something has gone horribly, horribly wrong for us Buckeye fans. So I can't really see it happening in the same way that you had all that garden variety SEC representation a decade and a half ago. I think it'll probably fluctuate a lot more between the two conferences because of that. The other side of this is, even if Urban, who has won national championships as a head coach of schools in both conferences, is telling you this, at the end of the day, the television network that is attached at the hip with the college football playoff is never going to admit that the Big Ten has surpassed the SEC.
No, why would they? That would be silly.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter really what Urban or any other fan thinks, because the myth of SEC supremacy, regardless of whether or not it's rooted in reality, is something that is going to be consistently pushed by the media that is attached to the sports postseason structure as long as that relationship exists. And it's not going anywhere. So you better get used to it, regardless of how sandbagged the SEC may or may not be in the years to come. You're not going to hear the end of it.
Right.
Heather Dinich will make a case for another 3 or 4 loss SEC team to be in the playoff next year, just as she did last year. So
I guess this conversation is interesting to me because of that, and that's the whole thing, right? Like it really is trying to evaluate in real terms how many seeds, how many teams are going to get in the college football playoff. And one of the other things that we're going to talk about today is the fact that they are approving changes to the college football playoff, right? So they're going to have just straight seeding, and that obviously has a ton.
Which totally invalidates Ohio State's most recent national championship. If they didn't win under the new playoff structure, and so they were blessed by their 6th seed status and rode that all. Is that what they were? 6, 7? I don't even remember at this point. But the point is the fact that they didn't have to deal with one of the first round buys as the other teams near the top did actually gave them a competitive edge because they were more seasoned. And if they were playing under a standard postseason structure where it's just whatever the top 12 standings are at the end of the season, they wouldn't have gone on the greatest run in college football history in order to win the national championship.
It's funny because like we did the 11 Warriors, and I say we, Chase put together, the new format and how the original 12 seeds. Ohio State still would have been the 6th seed. It wouldn't change anything. They would have been exactly where they were, in this thing. So they still would have had to play Tennessee. They still would have had to play, you know, whatever these winners are of these other
But
teams.
Oregon would have not had the layoff that they did, and so they would have been more ready to go for the rematch.
Oregon, I think they would have had the same layoff, though. That's the thing. Like, they would have gotten that bye.
They wouldn't have gotten a bye. They would have had to play the 12 seed, wouldn't they?
No, because I think they're still doing the straight seeding model.
Wait, so they're still doing the buys.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm kind of
the difference is,
I guess it makes sense. You'd have to do 16 in order to have no buys involved, I guess. But
which I think they want to do that at some point.
But they're just not anointing the conference champions and the wild card into the top 4 anymore, right? Okay.
And I do think that they're going to be like, you know, I think they will eventually move to a 16 seed thing and probably get rid of the buys and stuff like that. But like just getting rid of, you know, on the face of it, just straight seeding, it's pretty much moot. Like that you play the same teams anyway. Ohio State still beats those same teams. I mean, that's not, and I understand why they're doing it, because people are like, oh, why is, you know, Arizona State getting a first round bye or something like that? But it's just odd to me that that's a sticking point. And maybe that was, honestly, maybe at the beginning, that was just something that they had to include to get other schools or other conferences on board and say, oh, these conference championships matter. Because if they didn't do that, then maybe maybe there were schools or conferences that said, oh, well, we're never going to get in or something like that, or our teams are never going to have a chance. And then they just kind of realized that after the first year, they could just change it and do whatever they want. But ultimately, it's not like those first round buys helped anybody, to your point. So, like, I don't know. I mean, it's not, you know, the thing is, it's weird because Ohio State beat such a gauntlet. They had to go through the best teams in the entire thing. It wasn't a situation where some team got a good favorable seeding and it helped them out and they didn't have to play as many games and they end up beating cupcakes to win a national championship. Ohio beat all the best teams in the playoff. So by that logic, to me, it says that the seeding worked. Like everything worked as intended. Yeah. But to me, I mean, obviously that kind of lays bare that this is more about money and television and all that kind of stuff than anything else.
No, it's exactly weird. Because, I mean, when we spoke about this months ago, I mean, I think we were both on the side that you want to reward the teams like Arizona State and Boise State.
Yeah.
Like it kind of stinks, frankly, that those teams, especially in this era where you're going to have these 2 super conferences and then everybody else, it's going to be harder for them to get a foothold in the playoff.
Right.
So I don't like this. I mean, obviously I'm in a biased position. The format as is worked out very well for Ohio State. So if you're an Ohio State fan, it's like, why would we want to change anything? It
of course,
great for us. I don't like this move, but yeah, it's just more of the same in terms of what you just alluded to, in terms of it being promotional, incentively rooted.
Yeah, and I think because they will probably go to 16 teams, when they do that, they're going to have to figure out what conference schedules look like. And you know, it's funny, we had this like 10-year period where everybody felt that they absolutely had to have a conference championship and a conference championship, you know, win on their resume to get into the 14 playoff. And now it's like, that's the worst possible thing that you could do because it's just another opportunity to have a loss. So
yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you is, do you think that this change helps? Or, I mean, there's some people arguing that conference championships are going to just be totally done away with at some point in the future. Do you think that this move helps the profile of conference championships? Or
oh, no, it definitely hurts it. It hurts it. Yeah, because the idea then, and the reason, I think the logic that they're operating under is that because of conference consolidation, because you have all of these great teams in these conferences already, that it kind of lessens the need for a conference championship. There's no real point to have the best 2 teams in a conference play each other because you've got so many good teams in a conference anyway that have already played each other that it, like in a tournament situation, it doesn't really mean a whole hell of a lot. And you can think about it in the way of NCAA basketball, right? Where, yeah, you've got that conference tournament at the end of the year, but that means a lot less for teams that are already in March Madness than it does for teams that are trying to make it, if that makes sense. So if that's the case, I think in college football they would much rather guarantee that their best teams get in than, let's say, let's say Ohio State, is a dominant team throughout the season and they get to the conference championship game and then they lose in an upset in the conference championship, right? To like Northwestern, right? Let's say Northwestern had won that game or something like that. Big Ten Conference would be pissed about that because that would kill Ohio State's seeding and opportunity to win a national championship. So why did they even do that? Whereas if Ohio State wins, it doesn't change anything. Ohio State still would have been one of the presumptive top seeds. So like, I think for conferences, they're going to start looking at those championship games as a hindrance. And, I think they'll probably eventually go back to getting rid of them. And, I'm kind of sad about that. But on the other hand, for the Big Ten, it's like, it's an institution that's, 15 years old. Like it's not something that I would cry about, I don't think. So I would be sad, there are a lot of fun memories that Ohio State fans have of that championship. So it's like, it would be kind of sad losing that. There wouldn't be an opportunity for another 59.
I was there in 2014. I'm not going to.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, but it's going to be interesting to see where that goes and what that looks like. And one more thing that I can kind of add to that, the Stuart Mandel, the athletics, we talked about listicles and all this other stuff. He had his best college football program since 2000.
Off-season content, baby.
Yeah.
He put Ohio State, another listicle.
He put Ohio State #1 as the best college football program since 2000. I would say that's extremely debatable. I understand how bad Bama was before Nick Saban was there. Believe me. But they won 6 championships. That's a lot of freaking championships. And for me, that's hard to get over. And not only that, in large part, I think because I feel like Ohio State should have won at least one more, at least one more, and didn't get it. And it sucks that they didn't get it, but I can still enjoy the 3, I guess. I'm not. As if I'm sitting here like, oh, poor Ohio State. Only 3 national championships in the last.
It seems like the universal reaction has been that not making Alabama #1 is pretty ridiculous.
I agree with it.
I
understand. I understand that sentiment. Is my point. Is what I'm saying.
I don't think it's entirely ridiculous. I think there's an argument to make Ohio State #1.
I think there's an argument. I understand. And Mandel
argument. Not necessarily, but it's still one that
it's consistency versus like resume, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I get. I understand. Ohio State's not just in the past 25 years, but in all of college football history, they are by far the most consistent college football program.
Yeah, and to that point, I think there's a lot of recency bias baked into the reaction to this poll in terms of people largely forgetting the successes of a lot of these programs that happened in the 2000s decade before is it the 2010s are the aughts, or is it the 2000s that are the aughts?
The 2000s are the aughts because it's 2
What do you
zeros.
call the 2010s?
Just the teens, I guess.
The 10-aughts?
The taunts.
The 10-aughts?
I think there's the teens.
Okay. The teens.
Yeah.
So I'm not, when you're talking about 25 items on a list, a lot of times you're just kind of picking at semantics with,
of course,
what's,
right.
In terms of getting too worked up about anything on here. So other than Ohio State 1 versus Alabama 2, it's hard for me to be upset with a lot of other stuff on here. I do think Oklahoma at 3 is kind of a curious choice.
I agree.
I think anointing them over Georgia is...
Yeah. Oklahoma's won 1 national championship in the past 25 years. It was in 2000. And I guess we talked about this. They split one technically in like 2003.
I don't even know if I would put Oklahoma above LSU, who was number 5.
No, I wouldn't either.
To be honest. I wonder how much of that is like they're being rewarded for like Heisman Trophy success, because that's like probably one of the only things that I would think. But again, that's an individual award. That's not a team program achievement. Right. So I find that kind of to be a curious placement. I'm surprised more people aren't worked up about that placement, which I think is a little bit more egregious than the number 1, number 2 argument between Ohio State and Alabama, because I do think there's a power gap after that,
Sure.
relative to the rest of the programs. To Urban Meyer's point about the Big Ten surpassing the SEC, the SEC, I think, has 6 of the top 10 teams on this list and 7 of the top 15, but none after that. The Big Ten has, Ohio State was number 1. Oregon's number 7. USC's number 8. Michigan's number 11, which you love to see Michigan not crack the top 10.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's great. Wisconsin 16, Penn State 17.
That's the funniest part about the entire list.
That's my favorite.
That's really the only reason why I want to talk about it. Is just because, like, how angry are Penn State fans that, like, assuming they care about something like this, but Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin, all considered to be better than anything that they've put together in the past 25 years. And it's great because it's really largely on the back of James Franklin not being able to beat any of those teams. You can't beat Ohio State, can't beat Michigan.
I don't think Wisconsin has gone to a single college football playoff.
I don't think they have
So
either.
for them to be ranked ahead of Penn State on this list when we've had the playoff for almost half of the existence of this 25 years, it's frankly kind of hilarious.
Yeah, Franklin, kind of hilarious.
Then Iowa 23 and Michigan State 25. Boise State ranked 20th ahead of both of them is pretty rich.
Yeah.
And Washington also is 24th.
Historic Big Ten team, Washington and USC and Oregon.
So 5 of the last 10 are Big Ten teams. And then you've also got 3 of the top 10, and then Michigan sandwiched in between there at number 11.
I think ultimately, and I think ultimately my take on these lists is not that they matter at all, but just how angry they make people. And my general, reaction.
That's the goal of off-season content, is to foster emotional reactions over things that don't actually matter.
Correct. But also, like, I just love the idea of, like, some Penn State fan getting actually mad about that. That is something that I find very funny and good. But yeah, I think there's a reasonable argument to make it Ohio State at number 1. I don't agree, but I get it. Like, it's not something that I would be super upset about or anything like that. Gosh, my favorite team is considered the best. It's so frustrating to me. I'm going to go home and cry about it. I will say this, and I think this kind of thing, while generally stupid, does underline how impressive it is that Ohio State has been able to stay as good as it's been for, like, literally I'm trying to think, 80 years. It's like, seriously, think about it. Since even before Woody Hayes took over, they were pretty good. Like, they had some moderate success. They were doing well. They had won a national championship in the 40s. It literally, they have not missed. And on, like, coaching hires, things like that, they've had a couple years, in a row where they have not always been like the, at least a B+, A- program, but that's literally it. And you look at some of the other teams on this list, and just in the past 25 years, you can see some serious dips where they, lost terribly. And were not good teams. And some, like, Florida State, where you thought, okay, this is a team that's got a lockdown in Florida, and then just disappeared for years at a time. Same thing with Florida. Same thing with Texas, right? With all the institutional advantages that they have, Texas was lost in the wilderness for years and years. So that Ohio State hasn't had to do that. Hell, Alabama, like you pointed out, Alabama was garbage in the first half of the aughts. So, like,
that's the argument for them being number 2.
Right. And the fact that Ohio State has not had that is kind of remarkable and honestly pretty unique, I think, in college football. I don't think there's really any comparison to it. It is really
one of the reasons
impressive.
We're spoiled as Buckeye fans.
Yes, correct. I agree.
We don't rebuild, we reload, as the saying goes.
Of course. We're Scarface standing on top of his giant mountain of money and cocaine. I'm reloading.
Okay.
I actually think that's think it's a pretty apt metaphor for Ohio State fandom.
That's how Ryan Day's going to emerge from the quarterback room
Montoya.
when Julian saying his name started.
That's right.
Okay, I'm reloaded.
Tony Montana. I can't. Montana.
It's Montana. There's no flair on it. It's just
there's no tilde. There's no
Tony Montana.
Yeah, it's just coked up Tony Montana going after a guy with a chainsaw every year. That's pretty much what we do. All right, so that's some just the scuttlebutt with conferences and vis-a-vis other teams and all that kind of stuff. Let's go ahead and do Ask Us Anything. But before we do that, I want to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the dry goods store, LevenWarriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff. Check it out, including some of our very topical new items that you should definitely take a look at. So pretty cool stuff. Ask Us Anything, which you can do by sending us questions to Ask Us Anything or Dubcast at LevenWarriors.com. I've only done this hundreds of times. It's fine. You can ask us literally anything, Dubcast at LevenWarriors.com.
Within reason.
No, I mean, you can ask us anything. We just may or may not answer anything. So, but no, we are I would say that we're very good about it. This one is from Richie, who just asks, and that it wasn't done with a question mark. It was done with an exclamation point, which I think kind of shows where everyone's mentality is on this. Will Michigan ever receive meaningful punishment for cheating? No, is my answer. What's meaningful? What do you consider to be meaningful? Because that's the question Ohio State fans need to ask themselves. I know they have this hearing coming up. June 6th? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vacated results from
sure.
Lions was supplying them with illegally obtained information.
Yeah. And we'll see what results of that. I am very skeptical. I would hope that I am wrong because I think it would be funnier if they did
happen. It's tough to say at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like
50-50, time will tell.
I feel like if the intent was to not give them some kind of tangible punishment, that it would have already been resolved by this point and it would have been handed down. The NCAA would have said, okay, you can do your little, on-off suspension for Sharon Moore, where we'll still allow him to get a game in against his alma mater, and then you only suspend him for when they're playing,
the worst teams on your schedule.
Michigan State and or Michigan A&M, whatever. One of those early season
Southeastern, Central Michigan State. Whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say I wonder when the last time they've lost to an in-state team is, but I forgot Michigan State exists, even though they're apparently the 25th most successful college football program of the last 25 years. So I want to believe it's going to happen. I'm frankly more optimistic about it than Johnny is, but I'm also, I'm prepared at this point for, if you go back and listen to our show after Ohio State lost to Michigan, a big thing that I said coming out of that was, among many things, one of the things I said coming out of that was nobody is laughing harder at this result right now than Connor's Lions.
Oh God.
Ohio State lost.
He's achieved. Exactly. Yeah.
They lost the narrative when they lost that game in the fashion that they did, because you can no longer make the argument that everything that happened the last 3 years was a direct proponent of them being fueled by Lions intel. So
and then they won the national championship. So he got literally everything he wanted. He's done. There's nothing more that he wants or needs. So whatever happens to Michigan in the interim or after the fact, I don't think he gives a crap. I don't think it's going to matter to him one bit. He's going to keep doing pop-up appearances until he's milked that cow dry.
Let me ask you this. It has been speculated by, the people that have supposedly been in the know about this, that have posted about it on the mystical, magical 11 Warriors forums, that if the NCAA were to not recognize the national championship that Michigan won, that the college football playoff would respect that decision and follow suit in terms of stripping them. Let's entertain that. Let's say that the NCAA says, even though we don't have the authority to take it away from them, we're not right. We are invalidating it. We do not recognize.
Yeah, we won't put it in our materials. We won't be hanging up any signs. You know, we won't acknowledge that they.
Do you think the college football playoff would acknowledge that and follow suit with it, or do you think that in the interest of business or what have you, that they would still allow Michigan to be champion?
I mean, again, what does that look like? Like, do they go to Michigan's?
It's an unprecedented situation, so it's not an easy answer.
You're right, but my point is that like what the process of like the college football playoff stripping the title from Michigan, are they like going to Michigan and like ripping a badge off their Letterman's jacket? Like that's not. My point is that.
How did they take the Sugar Bowl away from Ohio State?
You can't. Once it's done, you can't undid a game that people all saw happen.
No, you just bring out the little Men in Black device.
Yeah, right. They do the neuralizer, and we just forget everything. No, that's my point. Like it's really hard to just take something away like that. Everybody saw the game happen. Everybody knows how it turned out.
Some of us turned it off after the first 5 minutes.
That's true.
It was obvious which direction it was going.
Right. Yes, same. But you can't go to Michigan. You can't force them to take down their banners. You can't tell them to stop telling people that they like. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why to me, stripping them of wins or a champion is such a facile kind of thing. Like, it's not a facile. I don't know how to say it right. But my point is, it's not going to do anything. It doesn't mean anything. But yeah, I can see where they would just not acknowledge it, or in their official materials be like, no, Michigan didn't actually win this or something. But I don't think anybody will care. I don't think that matters at all, because Michigan will still claim it. They'll still say that they won. They'll still have their trophies and their
But my point is, if like whatever, because the ultimately grander point here is like whatever the NCAA ultimately decides to put upon Michigan for this, do you think the CFP would seek to remain in lockstep with the NCAA, or
I think so.
Send the message that they're their own independent body and basically we're the ones in charge?
I think they will, but honestly, I think they'll do the former, but it would be very interesting if they did the latter. You know what I mean? Like that would tell a lot about where college football is going in the next 5 to 10 years. If they do just say the hell with the NCAA, like we don't care what they say, that'll tell you a lot about probably the fate of the NCAA more than anything else. Because if people genuinely don't care about that, then the NCAA has pretty much no authority whatsoever. I mean, they run college basketball tournament, and that's great. But beyond that, I don't think anybody would have. I'm still
very much of the belief that in an era where their authority is already not respected by the common college football fan and just the general landscape of the sport due to NIL, that like the fragile egos of the little men that run the NCAA, they want to send a message to the college football community that we're still in charge and what we say goes, and we have an opportunity here to make an example of somebody that made a mockery of our rules and regulations, and we're going to bring the house down on the big house.
I think that's valid. I think that could happen. If that does happen, I think that's the reasoning. That would be probably the reason.
That's the main reason I'm still optimistic that something is tangible is coming for Michigan.
Yeah, it could be.
But I do think that you've got a very healthy perspective on it, because if God forbid they just get a letter of admonishment, much in the same way that Michigan self-imposed on Sharon Moore. I think
feel
there's
bad
a lot-
about this,
There's
or
a lot
else
of people in the 11 Warriors forums that are going to be like, "You lied to us for years. How could you do this to us? You didn't know what you were talking about. How could this happen? It's a miscarriage of justice."
that voice. That sounds like a Muppet. That sounds like what what's the specific Muppet that sounds like? Oh God dang.
You're
All right,
asking
I'll have to
me
remember that.
for Muppet references. Come on, man.
I'm sorry. No,
I
that's
was
not...
barely able to invoke the Legion of Doom last week on this show.
All right, this next one's from Kevin. He says, historically, not counting Michigan games, how many noon football games do you think Ohio State has played since 1970? Too many. It would be my answer.
How the hell do you expect me to answer that question?
I have no idea, but let's say, okay, so since 1970, it's 2025. Well, okay, 2024. So
I would
that's...
guess basically half of their games every season are at noon.
I would say...
however many seasons have been since 72. So like what, 53?
Well, since 1970. So yeah, so let's say 55
times 6 is 330.
Okay.
That's
and
my
so let's say
guess.
about half of those. I would agree with you. I think the percentage of nooners that they have done is probably half. I would say it's close to half, and I think it was probably much more than that before they had widespread broadcasting of games live. Because remember, that didn't happen until the mid to late 80s. So I would guess a large proportion of them occurred at noon. Prior to the modern, I guess, quote unquote, modern era of college football. So that's an interesting question.
I'd say like 3 of their 4 non-conference games every year are nooners too.
Yeah. Which again, I'm generally fine with noon games. I just hate the idea that it's like it's a
noon
media
games aren't
default.
Inherently evil. Big noon games.
That's right.
Are the battle.
It was funny when we were saying big nude, and now it's not funny anymore. Now we're just mad. Okay, this one's good.
Big nude, take your top off.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, this next one. This is a non-football related question. It's from a good friend Alvin, who wants to know, what is your favorite spring activity? Staying inside. I hate spring.
Off-season content.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, I actually don't like spring. I do like riding my bike, and I do like that the weather occasionally becomes cooperative enough to be able to do that. So let's say that. Let's go with that, I guess. I like gardening too. I like planting stuff. That's kind of where I'm at. But
being able to drive with the windows down again.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I enjoy that.
Nice.
I used to deliver auto parts, and none of the trucks that the company owned had air conditioning, so I just delivered those rotors and those, whatever else is in a car, spark plugs and brake pads and all that other crap, and had the window rolled down, blasting old classic rock all day. It was great. I love that stuff. That is fun. I do love a good outdoor drive. It's fun. Last one here. This is from Jen, who says, "Hi guys, how are you? I am fine. I'm writing to ask, what is the dumbest / most ridiculous car you've ever seen out in the wild? Crazy paint jobs, rims, etc. If you're wondering, I've seen quite a few stupid cars out there, but the strangest one I've ever seen was a Mazda Miata that was completely covered in doll heads. There's 2 of those in Columbus, actually. There are 2 such cars that are completely covered in doll heads." He saw it Jen saw it on I-71. But yeah, there are 2 of those actually, which are pretty great. There's also a guy who's kind of a legend on the Columbus subreddit called Big Russ. And he's got this giant, like, tricked out like pickup truck, I think. And it's covered with Cookie Monster paint, like everything, like Cookie Monsters all over the place. And the name of the license plate is Big Russ. So shout out to Big Russ if you're out there, because your car freaking slaps. It's awesome. I love it.
Okay.
Living in the South, you have had to have seen some crazy. Living in Miami, God, you've got to have seen some crazy stuff.
This was in Charleston, actually.
Okay,
this was in December. At the end of December of 2022, I stumbled across this, and your Johnny Weebs is going to love this.
Oh, great.
This is a Honda. I can't tell what kind of Honda this is, but you'll get the idea pretty much as soon as.
Let's go.
Oh my god! Like this guy was whipping this in public. I really couldn't believe this. I got some.
It's pretty
And this
good.
was the hood.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
Gotta get. Oh god!
yeah. Johnny Weebs would love this one, huh?
I'm visibly recoiling.
How do you have any self-respect for yourself driving this thing around in public? You know,
The truth of, I mean, and that's like really well done too, right? Like that's not some like that had to have cost a lot of money. Is my point. Uh, not a choice I would make. But you know,
now I saw when I lived in Chicago, I saw someone who had done a wrap on their car where they, Nerve from Evangelion.
oh sure, yeah.
They had wrapped their car to make it look like they were a corporate like Nerve vehicle. So there wasn't any ridiculous
so they didn't have anime girls on the hood, is what you're
Masato
saying.
stuff on it like that one that I just showed on camera would imply. But no, it looked it looked like if Nerve were to have a corporate decal car, that's how they had the design on it. I thought that was
so it's like the Geek Squad, but for
if you're
a fictional anime company.
Right. There's a tasteful way to go about doing it without revealing your full power level like that guy did. So you can
what though?
love, but that you're.
Can I be honest though? Like in Charleston, South Carolina, a guy rolling around.
Yeah.
That's ballsy. I got to be honest.
It's crazy. It's insane.
I got to be honest. I got to give
insane.
when push comes to shove, you got to do what you love, and that's hey, if that's his thing, man, more power to him. It's not a choice I would make, but that's all right.
People are nuts.
People are nuts. The Big Russ one's pretty crazy. I have seen the doll ones, and again, there's two of them. I do want to emphasize that. I saw a guy riding down High Street. This is not a car. You know what the penny farthing bicycle was? It was the one with
that one with the big
yeah. It was the one with the huge front wheel and the small back wheel. Okay, I saw somebody riding a penny farthing bike down High Street, except the seat was like 8 feet in the air. So not only was it this ridiculous bike from the 1800s, but they were like riding it like it was.
How do you even get on those things?
So I asked somebody once. That's a good question, and I had the same question. And I asked somebody once who was like in the bike community, and they said, "Yeah, I know a dude who has one of those. They literally have to like position it up against the second floor of their apartment." And then they like crawl out a window and climb on it, and then just like have their buddies help them. I'm like, at that point, you're already got a death wish.
Yeah.
Just jump off the roof onto the seat. Like what the hell? Like the whole thing is stupid and dumb. But I just remember seeing a guy going down High Street on one of those, and I was like, how do you stop?
That's commitment to the bit.
It is commitment to the bit, and I appreciate that. One time when I was on campus, I saw another guy. This is to bring it back to the whole Japan affiliation, kind of thing. I saw a guy on a Segway he was like going as fast as he could. He was terrassing through campus, and he was wearing a kimono, like a full like obied kimono. He had really long hair, very obvious like nerdy guy, but with long flowing hair that was just flowing in the wind. And I was like, that guy is having the greatest day of his entire life. That is the best, coolest version of himself, and he has never felt better. And I was like, hey, like it's 7 a.m. I feel like crap. That guy feels great. Who am I to criticize? Great question from you guys. Great question from Jen. I appreciate that.
And this is why you tune into the YouTube version of the show instead of the audio version, because the listeners.
Oh yeah, that's right. The listeners didn't get to see the picture. That's true. No. That's a good point.
They didn't get the visual of the ridiculous Weebmobile I came across in my travels.
Also, look up Big Russ if you can on the Ohio State server. That guy rules, and I'm very much in support of whatever that guy's got going on. So that's Ask Us Anything. Thank you guys for sending those. Few more things that we want to talk about, and I know this is something that's very near and dear to your heart, George. But ESPN, right, recently announced. Well, it wasn't recently announced. It's done. It's over. Around the Horn's gone. It's an institution, a sports journalism institution on the level of Cronkite or or 60 Minutes vanishes poof into thin air.
I mean,
we'll never get Tony
point,
Reale arbitrarily handing out points again.
He hosted more shows than Oprah. Isn't that crazy?
No.
It's not?
No, because when you have one really successful show, why would you host multiple shows? If I'm hosting the most popular show of all time, why would I host other shows?
It's just crazy relative to he hosted more shows than David Letterman, or episodes of a show rather.
Oh, episodes of a show. I see what you're saying. Okay,
more than
that makes
Oprah,
sense.
more than Letterman.
That does surprise me a little bit because Oprah went from the late 80s all the way through the mid 2000s, right?
They did almost 5,000 episodes of that show. It was on since 2002.
That's so many shows.
Years. But it was probably 10 years past its expiration date.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that there were almost every person that I've talked to directly about this topic has expressed surprise that the show was even still on, and pretty much everybody has said, I enjoyed watching that show. Yeah, well, I'm invoking Johnny when I say that. But everybody agrees that it was great when, that stretch from 2005, 6 to into the early parts of the next decade.
Yeah,
the
sure.
show was consistently great.
It was great when I was watching it. And when I wasn't watching it was bad.
For that ATH PTI Power Hour, it was great.
Uh-huh.
But then there had to be a reason why everybody was consistently tuning out, right? Because it clearly happened to the point that they finally made peace with the fact that the show needed to be canceled, and that they announced the cancellation as far back as last summer, before earlier this year deciding on last Friday being the date of the final episode. And then Tony Reale went on the Dan Patrick Show this week, and when Dan was asking him about why he thought the show was being canceled, all the supposed reasons that Dan brought up, he didn't really want to acknowledge any of them. So there was just this kind of dissonance about why the show was actually ending.
You don't think the popularity of the show declined in conjunction? You don't think there was a coincidence, I guess, that the popularity of the show declined in conjunction with the rise of social media and people discussing sports events and news in real time? Because to me, that's a huge factor. I think that's
Twitter
a big
had been around. Twitter had been around since 2008. Facebook had been around since 2004, 2005.
Yeah, but people didn't really start getting into it until 2010. That's when really that kind of discourse started online. And to me, it's not particularly surprising that we're well, then why would I watch these guys discuss the same kind of thing that I've already seen people discuss online yesterday? You know what I mean?
No, I mean, I think that there would have been a tangible effect on all sports talk programming seeing a dip in interest if that were really the case. And I mean, First Take has only.
It's true. Skip Bayless
bigger.
Is still a giant of media.
I mean, Fox FS1 has. I mean, they've barely been around for 10 years or whatever, and their shows are still. I mean, Shannon Sharp was able to build himself up into taking over at ESPN at First Take from that platform that. I mean, frankly, when FS1 started, I think a lot of people just kind of thought it was a joke, but it's still stuck around. Right.
Yeah.
So it clearly built up enough of a following and an audience in the social media era that I think in some ways, social media actually aided the rise of a lot of sports talk programming. I think the bigger difference here is that where the distinct flavor of Around the Horn was, you had nationally acclaimed columnists representing different regions of the country that were giving a diverse variety of perspectives on the same issues that everybody was focused on across sports. And I shouldn't even say issues as much as just the stories and the news of the day in the sports world. That was a unique way of facilitating fast-hitting sports discussion that ultimately the show kind of lost its voice when they talked about this in the finale where, and this is where and when I say in terms of the lack of self-awareness relative to what Reality's Dan Patrick appearance was showcasing, they touted in the finale the exception that they made for Woody Page when he left the Denver Post. They had a rule on the show where they said, we're still going to have you on, even though we typically are only allowing people that have an attachment to a publication such as the Denver Post or the Chicago Tribune or Sun-Times or Dallas Globe, what have you. Is that the Dallas one? Is it the Dallas Globe? I don't know.
I actually don't know.
Yeah, wherever Tim Calishaw
Boston
is.
Globe.
Boston Globe. Okay. In any event, Woody Page is like, his brand is synonymous with Around the Horn. He's like, their most winningest, most appeared panelist ever. Like, they didn't want to lose him, understandably. So when he removed himself for whatever reason from the Denver Post, they made an exception for him to come on. But then when they, instead of just making that an exception, they did away with the whole rule, and they started slowly letting in these in-house ESPN personalities.
Well, sure,
I think turned a lot of people off.
Well, and
I don't think that they want to admit that those people that they have those relationships with that spent so many years on the show during its decline, they don't want to admit that, especially because they've gone on to bigger roles within the company itself. They don't want to admit that those people had an impact on the audience that once held the show in such high regard, gradually losing interest.
Well, I think they did that with a lot of their other shows too, where it was like, let's incubate these personalities a little bit and then see who pops and then throw all the money in the world at them to, like, make them big or whatever. And the funny thing is that for most of these people that didn't work at all, right? Like a lot of the people that they tried to essentially kind of like test out and push towards the public and Around the Horn or on their daytime shows or whatever, it just didn't pan out because people don't like to be, they don't want to be that obviously pandered to. People do want to be pandered to. Let's be very clear. They absolutely want to be, but they want to kind of like pretend that they have some kind of autonomy over it. And it's funny because then ESPN kind of realized that and ended up throwing $1 trillion at like McAfee, right? Where they were like, oh, okay, well, this is a guy who's like cool and whatever. And then ESPN's going to be like, we're going to be like, they did that with the,
but even in the case of McAfee, Barstool was the one that put.
But exactly, that's my point. That's what they did with Barstool. They were like, okay, we're going to bring on like, Big Cat and all these other dudes. And we couldn't develop our own personalities that we tried to like insert into these other, programming that we had. So instead we're going to kind of glom on and what we believe, kind of erupted organically out of like social media and whatnot. And even that didn't really, all the barstoolification of ESPN never happened because their shows weren't any good either. And, nobody really cares about all that stuff. So like it's all performative in a way. Like they're just trying to find a person that people will tune in for. But it's, and that, again, that's how you end up with Pat McAfee. Like they're like, this is the guy this time. And then when their ratings start to go down, they'll cut his contract and they'll try to find somebody else. Cause that's what they believe people watch for.
I don't necessarily know if I agree that ESPN is aware that is a detriment to.
Oh, I don't think they know. No, they'll just keep doing it. I don't think they're aware of it at all.
And the one guy in the finale that actually took a shot at the company was Tim Calishaw.
Good for him.
In his parting, because the thing that they did was that they had the eight members of the old guard. Mm-hmm. So like Page. Jay Mariotti wasn't there, obviously, but Page,
yeah.
Calishaw, Jackie Mack, Bob Ryan, who I can't believe they still put Bob Ryan on TV. But yeah. They had. He
was never good on TV.
It's only gotten worse. 8 members of the old. Well, we all get old, but my God, like
I know.
They got to get that guy some dentures or something at this point. But they had 8 members of the old guard on there, and when they had Calishaw on, he took a direct shot at ESPN in terms of them saying that the company is very transparently steering itself in the direction of hiring athletes over journalists in terms of
Right.
who is giving the analysis. And I've been thinking about that a lot since I heard it on Friday, as I've had to tune into the NBA pregame and postgame coverage of the Eastern or the Western Conference Finals, and I have to hear the likes of Kendrick Perkins, who is absolutely dreadful,
He's so
but is
bad.
somehow getting more money than. I mean, think about all the roles that ESPN has eliminated in recent years to keep Kendrick Perkins in the fold of their NBA coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly, truly dreadful. I don't understand what benefit the guy brings.
Well,
But because he's a name that people are aware of, he gets to stick it around at the desk.
But to your point, like I think it's also kind of an outcropping of people's general mistrust of the media, and then ESPN saying, "All right, well, if these people think that the media is just a bunch of liars and nerds who've never played the sport before, let's just get rid of all of them." Put on a bunch of athletes, and that'll make people happy, because that's what people.
I think it's a haphazard attempt to try to replicate what Inside the NBA has done with Kenny Smith and Shaq.
Yeah,
and
that could be a part of it. Yeah, I can see that.
You got two Hall of Famers and then a guy in Kenny Smith who has basically been there since the beginning.
Right.
He's got over 20, almost 30 years baked into it at this point. And then you've got ESPN saying, well, we have Kendrick Perkins.
But have you tried listening to Kendrick Perkins?
He is not Shaquille O'Neal. I hate to break it to you, Disney, but
or Charles Barkley.
Same.
Well, but again, that's the point. That's them going in and trying to replicate that stuff.
Anyway, I know Johnny didn't care as much about this topic as I
do care a lot.
I do think that as people that have put so much effort into sports writing, and the fact that, we are at the platform that we are with 11 Warriors, I mean, the interest in sports writing and sports journalism, pretty much everybody that has dipped their toe into that in some capacity was influenced by Around the Horn. So it is sad to see that it has finally ended. At the same time, I do think it's a sign of the times. Frankly, I'm glad that the current, the way that what the show turned into, I'm glad it has ended. I was sad to see what it had become. But
it's like on The Simpsons when Krusty announces his retirement, and the reporter's like, "Why not now? Or why now? Why not 10 years ago?"
That's exactly what it
is. So yeah, that's the Dubcasters. We have a couple other things just real quick. LeBron is going to get a honorary Doctor of Public Service degree. Good for him. That's cool. We do want to give our thoughts to the family and friends of Julian Fleming. He was in a serious ATV accident, and I believe took the life of, I think, his girlfriend. Yeah. So we just want to just say that we're thinking of them. They're definitely part of the Ohio State community, no matter where he went on after that. I think that's important. So I hope that he gets all the support that he needs there. And look, it's a long off season. There's going to be more to talk about. There's more to discuss. As we alluded to, that Michigan hearing is coming up.
It's coming up in 2 weeks.
Coming up in a couple of weeks. So we're going to be talking about that.
For a hell of a threat level.
Yeah, I guess I got to do that. But yeah, so we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep getting into it. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.